what has been kind of hidden is the gay casting couch. You know, the day I arrived in Hollywood, they told me when I was offered the job at Warner Brothers that you need to know this town is run by a homosexual and mafia. And I believe.
Oh my gosh! Don't say that. We got to wrap it up. No, be careful with what you say on Infowars. Even here, we don't want them coming after us. Thank you, Luke.
Vaccinated guy. Aunt Marie hit song Snowbird was actually about the time Kurt spilled the Coke at the Diddy party on his bird between his legs. That took a lot of turns. I can't believe I read it. Thank you, Unvaccinated guy. Back to Jimmy.
So I'm going to tell you the real story behind the sexual charge of Matt Gaetz, right? So Matt Gaetz doesn't take the donor money. He's not funded by Israel. He's an actual reformer. He's an outlier inside the Republican Party. And so they try to get rid of him. And what are the first thing you do is you launch a sexual misconduct charge. And so this woman, Mel, Village Crazy Lady, on Twitter, this is quite the story. So, all right, friends, now that Matt Gaetz is out of the running, you're going to hear a lot of takes on what's happening and plenty of keep your D in your pants. And that's always good advice. The story I'm about to share goes way beyond anything you could possibly imagine. So if you're interested in the whole story consolidated in one place of what really happened with and to Gaetz, take a seat and let me tell you a story. So the story begins in the fall of 2019 in Florida with this man, Joel Greenberg. At the time, Joel Greenberg was 2.5 years into his first term as the tax collector for Seminole County. So I'm just going to jump to the end, and then I'll fill in the. This guy is also in charge of issuing driver's licenses in Florida, and so he issued driver's licenses to 17-year-old girls, saying that they were 18, 19, 20 years old, and then said that Matt Gaetz had sex with one of those, but even though he was doing that. So here's the rest of the story. Greenberg is your classic rich kid who drinks through life, lighting fires everyone else is forced to put out, never landing hard because daddy's money always catches his fall. You know the type. We all do, and Joel approaches his role as tax collector no different than any other. By fall 2019, Seminole County was awash with rumors about the federal investigation into Greenberg's crypto scam with tax collector dollars. These rumors inspired a local music teacher, Brian Butte, to throw his hat into the ring and challenge Greenberg in the Republican primary slated for the following year. Despite the many advantages Greenberg held over Butte in the race, incumbency, wealth, name recognition, etc., Greenberg's significant criminal activity as tax collector likely contributed to him becoming obsessed with destroying Butte both publicly and privately. So this guy is the criminal, and he's being challenged by Butte, and he decides to try to destroy the guy because he knows he has a criminal this guy has a criminal background. So throughout late 2019 and into 2020, Greenberg rolled out a series of ever-escalating smear tactics targeting Butte. They started rather typical, labeling Butte, who is from Michigan, as a carpetbagger, but they grew increasingly vicious. He created fake Facebook profiles pretending to be Butte's students, leaving comments on public posts trashing Butte as an awful teacher and a pervert. Last year, the page posted an attack on Greenberg's primary opponent titled Creepy Brian Butte. The stalking charge against Greenberg alleges that he used a pseudonym to send letters to the middle school where Butte is a teacher, falsely claiming that Butte had a sexual relationship with a student. Greenberg allegedly set up fake Facebook page making the same charge and set up a fake Twitter account in Butte's name promoting white supremacy. So this guy was going all out. Okay, this all comes back to Matt Gaetz. This is all going to come back to Matt Gaetz. Greenberg's antics finally reached an apex when he mailed handwritten letters to the administration at the school where Butte taught, accusing him of sexually assaulting the students. Greenberg probably didn't expect those letters to be taken so seriously, or else he would have likely been a little more careful. But alas, he was not. And when the letters were turned over to the local sheriff's office, both his fingerprints and his DNA were lifted from those letters, and he was arrested on June 23rd, 2020, and charged by the Department of Justice with stalking. At the time of this arrest, Greenberg's phone was confiscated and searched, and believe it or not, this is where his real legal troubles began. On his cell phone and later home computers, police found evidence of Greenberg committing damn near every crime in the book. Drugs, prostitution, identity theft, wire fraud, crypto market manipulation. But the silver tuna was a series of messages that occurred in the late spring through early fall 2017 between Greenberg and then 17-year-old girl, discussing, among other things, their many sexcapades around Florida and beyond. Further investigation revealed that from December 26 through December 2018, Joel Greenberg was a customer on a sugar daddy website where he solicited various women for sex and escort services. This is where he met the aforementioned 17-year-old girl. One of the individuals Greenberg paid for commercial sex acts was a minor under the age of 18 for part-time, when Greenberg paid her to engage in commercial sex acts with him and others, referred to herein as the minor. Greenberg met the minor over the internet on the website. The minor had an account on the website in which the minor represented that she was an adult. All told, Mr. Greenberg spent 70 grand on hookers he met on the sugar daddy website, much of which he paid for with the government-issued American Express card. He had an online account at a website that advertised itself as a place where sugar daddies could find sugar babies. Greenberg used at least 4 accounts to pay for commercial sex acts: his personal Venmo account, his personal American Express account, his American Express account at the tax collector's office, and his personal Fifth Third bank account. From December 2016 to December 2018, Greenberg used those accounts to conduct more than 150 financial transactions totaling over 70 grand, all of which involved Greenberg paying women for commercial sex acts using those accounts. This all comes back to Matt Gaetz. In August 2020, the Department of Justice charged Greenberg with sex trafficking of a minor, identity theft, and production of false identification documents, among other things. Turns out in Florida, the Office of County Tax Collector doesn't just collect taxes, they also issue driver licenses and state IDs. And Mr. Greenberg had taken full advantage of this privilege during his time in office. Greenberg had not only created multiple false Florida ID cards for himself, he also created a fake ID for his underage lover after finding out that she had been lying to him about her age. It says right there, they discovered evidence that Mr. Greenberg, whose job responsibilities included issuing licenses, was creating fake identification cards for himself and a teenage girl. And this is where Matt Gaetz comes into the story. So there's Greenberg, and there's Matt Gaetz, and there's Roger Stone. From what I can gather, Gaetz and Greenberg became acquainted at some point in the first half of 2017. The first public record of them associated on a private level comes from this picture posted on Twitter on July 8th, 2017, with none other than Roger Stone. I think it's safe to say that the two did become friends. How good of friends, that's up for debate, but there was a relationship. Okay. After getting arrested in June 2020, at some point, Mr. Greenberg, lawyer, approaches Bill Barr's Department of Justice with a proposition. He claims he can provide evidence that a sitting congressman, Matt Gaetz, had engaged in sex acts with a minor. Bill Barr's so this is Greenberg trying to get a deal for himself. So Bill Barr's Department of Justice then proceeds to open a secret investigation into these allegations that remains a secret until it's leaked the next spring on March 30th, 2021 by the New York Times. Wonder why? Part 3. But this is the same Matt Gaetz that says Bill Barr was in on the Jeffrey Epstein murder. That's the same. Yep. So do you see what's happening? Part 3, the man in Iran. Listen to this. Faithful viewers of Tucker Carlson were treated to a peek behind the D.C. curtain on a random Tuesday night in late March 2021. Do you remember this when Matt Gaetz was when this leaked? Matt Gaetz goes on Tucker Carlson and he tells this what seemed like a bizarre story of his father-in-law being extorted for $25 million. Remember that? And everybody thought like Matt Gaetz seems crazy. But here's the story. Earlier that day, the New York Times had released a bombshell story alleging that the Department of Justice had opened an official investigation into Matt Gaetz over allegations he had engaged in sex with an underage girl. Following Tucker's opening monologue, he introduced Matt Gaetz and gave him free rein to tell his side of the story. Anyone watching is unlikely to soon forget the absolute bizarre story that Gaetz proceeded to tell. It involved a $25 million extortion threat against his father. Oh, sorry, not his father-in-law. His father to help free an American hostage in Iran. What? That would then be paid back with a presidential pardon for Gaetz on all these sex charges. What? Gaetz demanded that the FBI release the tapes they had in their possession of the recordings made by his father in interviews with his extortionists. He didn't hesitate for a second to name the alleged extortionist. The name was David McGee. He said he was a former prosecutor for the Northern District of Florida who now worked at the prestigious Biggs & Lane law firm in Pensacola. There's that guy. That's the guy who was trying to extort $25 million out of Matt Gaetz's father that they were then going to use to get this guy out of Iran. But then the president would pay that back by giving him a pardon for the sex crimes that they're ginning up against him. You see how this works? Okay. He was resolute and unafraid when talking, and yet he sounded like an absolute lunatic. I know. I was watching live. I wasn't the only one. I know. Me too. Tucker was clearly extremely annoyed and unconvinced by the end, and yet 3.5 years later, I know now that everything Matt Gaetz said was true. Bob Levinson was the man in Iran, this guy Bob Levinson. The official story about Bob Levinson is that he was a retired FBI agent who was contracted by a semi-off-the-book CIA unit to run covert operations in Iran. He was kidnapped from Kish Island following a meeting with an American fugitive living in Iran that had been arranged by former NBC producer named Ira Silverman. This thread is already long enough, so I'm not going to speculate on what I think, but there's plenty out there if you want to go chasing rabbits. So Levinson gets kidnapped in March 2007, and his disappearance was acknowledged by George Bush in June of 2007 as concerning. But no one from the federal government will admit that Levinson was working for the CIA. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, from 2009 to 2011, the FBI was running its own covert operation to get their retired agent back. And they had devised an ingenious plan to keep the whole thing off the books. They contracted with a Russian billionaire, Oleg Deripaska, to pay for the rescue mission, $20 million in total, in exchange for a fast-tracked green card for Deripaska and his family. You see how this all works? It's amazing. Enter David McGee. During his time at the Department of Justice, McGee worked as an organized crime task force. That's how he knew Bob Levinson, who specialized in Russian money laundering. McGee became a liaison between the Levinson family and Deripaska. See this? Now let me just step right here and say this whole thing is nuts, and stinks to high heaven. To make matters worse, who was the FBI point man for the Deripaska deal? Andrew McCabe. Yes, that Andrew McCabe. You know, the one from the FBI who got caught with his text messages and lying about trial, all that stuff. And the Russiagate, the Andrew McCabe Russiagate guy. Anyway, the FBI team gets a couple proof of live videos, meaning that Levinson's still alive, and they have a soft arranged in place when the Clinton State Department steps in and shuts the whole thing down. Something got them spooked, and it's never been disclosed what it was. But after 2011, Levinson is never heard from again. All along, the Iranians deny any involvement in his disappearance. So eventually the CIA gets desperate, and a handful of classified documents confirming Levinson's contact with the CIA are leaked to the AP in December 2012. Still, the Iranians don't budge. This was surprising because at this point, they no longer have any reason to lie. The Americans weren't lying anymore. Time to start negotiations. But nope, the news was greeted with radio silence. Years go by, and no more pictures or videos ever arrive. And then comes the Iranian nuclear deal of 2016. Unbeknownst to most, the Obama team had negotiated the release of 4 Americans being held in Iran in exchange for the U.S. dropping charges against 7 Iranian nationals for sanctions violations. Bob Levinson was not one of those Americans. The American Jewish community was furious. They already saw the Iranian deal as a stab in the back to Israel, but when the word broke about the prisoner exchange and Bob Levinson wasn't on the list, many took it as a deliberate betrayal of American Jews too. Fast forward some more. Trump takes office, cancels the nuclear deal. Christine Levinson sues Iran in U.S. courts and is awarded $1.2 billion judgment in January 2020. And in March 2020, the U.S. government declares Bob Levinson legally dead. Case closed, right? Wrong. At some point in the summer of 2020, a former Air Force intelligence officer named Bob Kent claims to have received news from his network in Iraq, alleging that Bob Levinson was still alive. Kent even claims he received pictures to prove it. So Kent contacts David McGee, who then tells Kent about the last privately funded search and rescue for Levinson, and that's when Kent hatches the plan to rope Don Gates into paying for this, so Matt Gates' father, into paying for the new rescue mission. So now I know what you are all wondering. How did these men know about the Matt Gaetz investigation? How did all these people know that the Department of Justice was investigating Matt Gaetz? To my knowledge, that has never been revealed. If I had to guess, I'd say someone in the Department of Justice or FBI leaked that info to McGee, who then told Kent about it when he was contacted. But that's still only have the end. That's not okay. This is the part of the story where I start spiraling. I start wondering just how long this plan had been in the works. Nothing adds up, but for now, I'll spare you my suspicions and stick to what I know. Part 3, the grand plan. In March 16, 2021, when Don Gates, Matt Gaetz' father, receives the first text message from Bob Kent about his grand plan. In exchange for Don fronting Mr. Kent's rescue mission of Bob Levinson, unnamed agents with a powerful contact in the Biden administration would convince the president to give Don's son, Matt Gaetz, a full presidential pardon on his looming sex trafficking charges. The price, $25 million. I wish I had a picture of Don Gates' face when he read that. You're going to have to pay us $25 million. Naturally, Gates Sr. was incredulous. What in the world was this man talking about? Matt wasn't facing any sex trafficking charges. Don called Matt, who immediately told him to contact the local FBI office. The FBI suggested that Don meet with David McGee wearing a wire, and Don agreed. However, just before the meeting took place, Don requested a written acknowledgement from the FBI on the purpose of this investigation and meeting. he was worried something he said could be used against Matt in the case they still didn't know anything about. The FBI was reluctant at first, but they eventually agreed. The very next day, the New York Times ran the leak on the Department of Justice case against Gates. There it is. Going back and watching the Tucker Gates interview again this week, everything he said finally made sense. The FBI had planned to use Don's meeting with McGee against Matt. The quasi-immunity demand from Don quashed that, so they leaked the story to the New York Times and then buried the wiretapes. McGee and Kent denied everything. They said there was no extortion. It was a simple proposition. They accused Matt of using this to distract from his charges. Oh, really? Then why'd they just, where's the wiretap then? Where is it? Former Air Force intelligence officer accused of trying to extort Matt Gaetz breaks silence to admit he did ask Congressman's father for $25 million, but says it was to rescue an American hostage, Robert Levinson, in Iran. But wait, there's more. Because this story wasn't already weird enough, here's another twist. So at the same time that Don Gaetz was getting those messages from Kent and McGee, Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, he receives a message from an acquaintance of his named Jacob Novak, who works as the media director for the Israeli consulate. The first one arrives the Saturday before the story breaks. Here's the first one. It says, "Scoop, I can't report. Representative Gaetz is the subject of a secret grand jury probe of sex with minors and possibly murder conspiracy. I trust the source. Charges, accusations apparently very credible." This is to Scott. What? This is amazing, right? The next two arrived on Wednesday, the 31st, after Gaetz went on Tucker and revealed David McGee's name to the world. I don't want to believe him, but my sources said it looks bad from closer in. I'm betting against it, but the extortion counterclaim sounds credible. Has witnesses, apparently. The backstory is this is screwing up my efforts to free Bob Levinson. Gates' dad was secretly finding us. Finding us? I'm going to say. So I'm very much wanting this to be untrue. I've got a commando team leader friend of mine nervously waiting for wire transfers to clear. They have documents? Yes, some numbers and facts have been altered. The real documents do not extort, and we only asked for $25 million as an estimate at first. We came way down. To his credit, the whole thing was sketchy as hell to Scott Adams, so he took it upon himself to release Novak's messages. The Israeli consulate immediately distanced themselves from Novak's messages, but he was not fired or disciplined. Okay. This is only one more slide. Here's the wrap up. So Joel Greenberg pled guilty. You remember the guy, the tax collector who had the paying all the women for sex on sugardaddy.com and issuing fake licenses to underage girls saying they were of age? Joel Greenberg, he pled guilty to sex trafficking, identity fraud, wire fraud, and a host of other charges in May of 2021. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and 10 of those years are coming from the mandatory minimum imposed by the sex trafficking charge. The Department of Justice did not close its case against Matt Gaetz until October of 2022. They never publicly acknowledged why he was not charged, although it becomes fairly obvious once you learn that Joel Greenberg had produced fake IDs for the underage girl in question. How can you convict someone of statutory rape when this woman was using a real state Florida driver's license to present as being of age? So, of course, because it's the swamp, that's not where Matt's troubles ended. So what it looks like to me, Ian, is that maybe Matt Gaetz did have some kind of sex with an underage girl, but that he was set up by this Greenberg because he gave the underage girl a fake ID that it's a real ID. It wasn't fake. It was a real ID that said she was of age. So that complicates the process. That's why they can't prosecute. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I mean, this story is so crazy, and I saw it pass through my Twitter feed, and I saved it and didn't have time to read through it all. So I'm super glad that you just did.
So there's just
that's like,
go ahead.
Yeah. Finish it up.
Let me just finish it. So, but of course, because it's the swamp, that's not where Matt's troubles ended. The snakes in D.C. were going to milk that investigation for all it's worth. And when Gaetz went for McCarthy during the speaker fight, McCarthy and his allies plotted carefully to get their revenge. So now they got this over him. So this guy's a wild card, just like they would do to Bernie. And the FBI threatened to prosecute his wife, allegedly. Just like that's just how they control everybody, right? That's why they have P. Diddy parties. Yep. That's why they have Jeffrey Epstein. So we saw the culmination of that plotting on full display today. There are still lots of unanswered questions. Who is the we that Jacob Novak referenced in his text to Scott Adams? Who leaked that info about the Gates case to Bob Kent? Was Joel Greenberg running a honeypot scheme? If so, for who? Sure would be nice to get an attorney general in office who actually gave a damn about answering any of those questions. So that guy, Joel Greenberg, who's in prison, they're saying, was he running a honeypot? Did he do that to set up Matt Gaetz? Looks like it. So go ahead, Ian. You take it where you want.
I was just going to say that this is a textbook example of how quickly things get complicated when you overlay covert intelligence operations that are segmented into just infinite amounts of compartmentalized information, and you cross that with corrupt bureaucrats and deep state actors that have all of their own agendas, and you wind up with like covert programs that go south. Then there's people that need things that no one can talk about, and then there's corrupt individuals trying to find behind, like, off the books solutions using their corrupt power networks within compartmentalized intelligence networks, and pretty soon you wind up with like people blackmailing people for rescue missions that aren't supposed to exist, for extortion money that is illegal, and it's like, it sounds insane, but the more you learn about the history of the CIA and just like how intelligence agencies and government actually work, it just sounds more and more like a rerun of last episode. That's insane.
So do you think so? So the theory here, this is an amazing Twitter thread by Mel.
Yeah.
And I remember I was watching Tucker Carlson, or I saw the video of Matt Gaetz on Tucker Carlson because it was such a crazy, bizarre thing. It sounded like Matt Gaetz was full on batshit crazy.
Yeah.
But now we
know.
know.
Before we knew nearly as much about him, too.
Yeah. We didn't know anything about Matt Gaetz at the time.
No.
So the media is always smearing him. And of course, so whenever he goes up against power, they pull this shit out. So now I bet they pulled this shit out again. And they said, hey, but you did have sex with an underage girl, even though you can't be convicted of it because a jury wouldn't find you guilty because this guy set you up with a real Florida ID that said she was older.
There's a bigger question there, too, that you were alluding to just a second ago, is like, put the pieces together here. How did this underage girl get into Matt Gaetz's orbit,
right,
and essentially get into a sexual relationship with him? And the only thing that ties all these pieces together is the dude making the fake IDs that was also soliciting a whole bunch of sex from girls that are working on this website. And so if this girl is working on this website soliciting sex, and this guy gets a fake ID for her, and he obviously knows that she's underage, and then somehow that girl that he's just happens to be the girl that Matt Gaetz has sex with, and that happens to be tied to this other scandal that this guy is tied to, like, I think you're right that starts to point towards potentially there being some sort of honeypot, either single operation or a bigger organization going on. Because we all know that DC is full of honeypot and blackmail operations for this exact purpose.
Exactly.
Because it's not like a senator, like Matt Gaetz isn't just like inherently interacting with a whole bunch of 18-year-old girls in his daily life.
Right.
Like, it's not like there's a whole lot of them walking through his normal daily routine. So the question is, how did she get into his daily routine, and who put her there?
That's
and
right.
Is there something else behind that coincidence?
How old is Matt Gaetz? He's 40.
I'm also curious when he married Ginger Gaetz.
He's 42. So he's
not the best look.
So he was like late 30s when okay. So it's not a crazy theory to think that but also that they then use this because the establishment does not want Matt Gaetz. The Mossad doesn't want Matt Gaetz. Bill Barr, the people who killed
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein, do not want Matt Gaetz as the attorney general. So they're going to do anything and everything, and they're going to use all the blackmail and compromat that they have to get him out of and withdraw his nomination. And I bet that's what they're going to say, hey, it doesn't matter if you can be convicted or not. We're going to release the report that has this girl saying you had sex with her when she was 17. We're going to put her on 60 Minutes, and your whole character and life is going to be over.
Yeah. And like, let's remember, so I just looked it up. So Matt Gaetz got married after this incident allegedly happened. And so he was single at the time. And this girl was working on on a prostitution website. So she's clearly willingly using her sex for money, right?
Right.
And so I think it seems highly likely that Matt was probably approached by her, and I'm speculating, but like she's clearly willing to. It's not like she's an unwilling.
Yeah,
victim.
the way a
like
honeypot operation works.
Exactly. And so when Matt Gaetz, as a single man, is approached by a apparently attractive young woman who is presenting as being over 18, there's no crime there on his part at that time. And so they need it to be an underage girl. So it's like an interesting coincidence that the underage girl that happens to have the fake ID just happens to be the one. Like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Welcome to One Nation Under Blackmail, everybody.
And that's why he was so, he was so confident about it and wanted to talk about the extortion of his father for 25. He was like, I had to do this.
Yeah.
That girl was I saw her. That was a real ID, that whole thing. And yeah.
And it says even more about why I think regular people were so excited about Matt Gaetz as AG. And it says even more about why there was so much uproar against Matt Gaetz, because in the same way that Tulsi is an amazing pick for DNI because she has been targeted by the former DNI, so to speak, Matt Gaetz would be an amazing pick for AG because he has been targeted by this corrupt institution already.
There you go. So just like they put Tulsi in charge of the agency that had been targeting her and following her around through airports and putting her on a terrorist watch list, now she's in charge of that agency. It would have been amazing to have Matt Gaetz be in charge of that agency that did this whole slimy thing to him. And they are going to do this because he's going to go after the people involved in the Epstein. He's going to expose the Mossad. He's going to expose the rot inside the Department of Justice. He's going to expose all this criminality inside the FBI. He's going to do that. And
it's also telling, Jimmy, that Matt Gaetz was the only pick from Trump so far that you could really point to and say he is anti-Zionist in any major way. Like, he was the only one that was not taking the money, openly speaking about Epstein, and openly, like, he was the one. And so I was really excited about him. And so it's a funny coincidence that that's the guy that gets the sex scandal targeted at him, just like every other. Like, Israel is the sexual blackmail nation, and it just so happens that the anti-Israel guy gets some weird blackmail sex scandal. Surprise.
Okay, so there's still more to come. So that should be mind blowing. I hope you enjoyed it, Ian. I certainly enjoyed bringing it to you.
Oh yeah,
I'm glad I could tell you something you didn't know. All the time I'm learning from you. But now, Steph's going to read a few super chats, and I've got something else that might blow your mind.
Just a little. I think you asked when they got married. They met at Mar-a-Lago in 2020. Matt Gaetz and Ginger, and they had a 10-month whirlwind romance and then got married. 10 months. 10 months.
Heard that.
Not like 10 years, 10 months. Okay, here we go. I love Mo Deng. I'm going to leave my family for her. Okay, Red Z. Americans are good at pinning medals on Nazis. It's called Operation Paperclip. Savage. Jimmy and Steph, I met you all in Minneapolis. Surgery went well and recovery and doing well. Was wondering when you were coming back to Minnesota. Love the show. It helps with all the time. I love you. Love Keaton and Russell. It would be about 18 months. We got a little bit of time there. Thank you, Peter. Gator Pete. Hey, Steph, check out that video. Oh, I did check that video out. Okay. Anne Murray's hit song Snowbird was actually about, oh, I read that one. All right, let's see here. Has Space Force passed the audit? Thank you. La La Cha Cha, thank you so much. Terrence Howard will balance their budget with his new age math, unvaccinated guy. All right, I think I got through that. Jimmy, can you get, please, Paul Kingsnorth on the show? He's an anarchist, leaning Eastern Orthodox Christian who just gave a great talk against Christian civilization. Kate Cotwas. Thank you, Kate Cotwas. Elon Musk's keeps posting clips of Milton Friedman, the father of neoliberalism, on X. When are we going to start pretending he's some kind of populist champion? He's an oligarch, the enemy of workers. Kate Cotwas. Americans are good at pinning medals on Nazis. It's called Operation. I read that one. Savage. Thank you. All right. I read that one from an unvaccinated guy. And Booty Eater. Congrats to Reverend Ray Sisman for appointed. Okay. I read that one. All right. Terrence Howard will balance the budget. I read that one. I read a lot already. NASA spent millions to develop a pen that can write in 0G. The Soviets just brought a pencil with them. Audit. Smiles. Thank you, Savage. Barb, small businesses will get fined $591 per day if they don't complete a beneficial ownership report by January 1st. What? Barb, I'm sending that one immediately to my accountant. Did not hear about that one. All right, thank you for that, Barb. I never thought Infowars would outlive MSNBC. Benjamin Vito.
Yep.
Wilford, I will be dead naming MSNBC as long as those degenerates continue to lie to us. Thank you, Microsoft.
Dead naming.
NBC.
I think people are. It's fun that all that stuff is starting to go away.
Kathy said Elon announced he's buying MSNBC.
Did he? Did he?
I haven't seen.
I
it
haven't
yet.
seen it yet.
Yeah,
but that would be awesome. The guy's got the money. He's now worth over $300 billion. How much would it cost to buy MSNBC? A couple of billion.
A lot less than Twitter.
A lot less than Twitter.
Yes.
What did it cost to buy Twitter? Was it like 40 million?
40 something billion, 42 billion.
42 billion?
You're gonna show Jimmy.
Yeah,